Keeping It Human. And we are doing another Story DNA hangout here with Robert Rose from Content Marketing Institute. He is their Chief Strategy Officer, and he knows about as much a story as anybody out there from what I know. And in talking to Robert, it's always fun to talk to him. So we're going to talk today about ROI and how do we think, measure, and plan for that. Because there's some folks, I was telling Robert before we hit the live button, that some folks in sort of the wider content marketing and strategy community think about story at a tactical level. And I also think there's another layer at a higher strategic level. And some people say, nah, there isn't. And I think there is. I think companies need to pay attention to it because there's leading indicators and lagging indicators. And I think these are things that are really important that we have to think about. So with that, I'm going to throw it to you, Robert. I don't want to do all the talking. We've got you here with your smarts and your very dapper looking mustache. So talk to me a little bit. How do you think about story measurement and ROI, sort of high level and maybe then sort of lower tactical level?
Certainly. And always great to be with you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's always totally fun. Look, when we talk story, and you know this better than most, the word itself gets overused, right?
Yeah.
And so, are we talking about brand? Are we talking about customer experiences? And so just for the sake of level setting, I think what we're really talking about here, at least today, is these content-driven customer experiences that we're creating at all parts of the customer journey, whether it be awareness, whether it be lead nurturing, whether it be loyalty, whether it be cross-sell, upsell, whether it be turning our customers into evangelists. And so if we look at it through that lens, the sort of content marketing more broadly lens, it really comes down to measurement. Like, how are we actually going to measure the strategic value of these customer experiences that we're creating? And so one of the things that we're looking at, and I'm so glad that you brought up the idea of strategic measurement, right? So even something as ill explored as lagging and leading indicators and those types of things. And so one of the things that we are seeing really sort of take root for the brands that truly understand the power of content marketing and are truly extracting the value of content marketing is looking at strategic value is how do these experiences provide multiple lines of value to the business? And what I mean by multiple lines of value is, look, campaign-driven marketing, that which we are doing every single day, putting out a campaign of email, social media, SEO, direct marketing through Google search, direct advertising, those provide value to the business in time, right? So we get the right effectiveness. We get the number of leads we're looking for. We get the amount of visitors we're looking for. We get the right amount of those campaigns provide value in time. Content marketing, if we look at it as a true investment, which, I have a whole rant about why I think campaign-based marketing doesn't provide ROI, but a true investment, a return on investment over time. We put money in and the value of that thing increases over time is really how we can start looking at an owned media property, a customer experience that we're creating. And there are different ways to look at that, right? One is campaign-based value. Did we get more leads? Did we get more traction? Did we get more advertising views, et cetera? But there are other elements of value. How is our customer database improving? How are we actually driving down other elements of cost in our business, like media buying, like SEO, like PR, like coverage and awareness? How are we actually elevating the brand to even drive revenue out of it? There are brands today, Red Bull, of course, is the poster child here. They actually get revenue from their marketing opportunities. And so there are multiple ways to look at strategic value through the creation of content-driven experiences, story, and understanding that strategic value is core to then getting down to that tactical value of what each one of those equates to.
Well said. I think one of the things that equally drives me crazy, and it's I'm going to jump on that rant bandwagon, is when I hear people really think about getting so deep in the campaign level that they've just all but ignored the really important strategic pieces, as we're talking about, that actually happened first. So for example, somebody said to me, a very high level executive at a tech company, software company in my backyard in Silicon Valley, it's like, well, why would we do that? And how do we measure story? And how do we know it's even working? I said, well, you're going to know immediately, in my mind, because a leading indicator, before you even talk about the external kind of brand firewall, is, do your employees even understand it? Can they even,
Right.
can they even,
Yes.
if you ask them what you do, you don't get, 200 different answers, which in this company was exactly what was happening, because a lot of the people outside of the engineering world, the software development world, and other parts of the admin parts of the company could not articulate what the company did, what their core story was, and what their mission was. And I said, so for starters, it seems to me you've got these human measures that are strategic, which is everybody can articulate the same story. They know what they're fighting for, and it's something bigger than themselves, and they have that. Then these other things will fall in line. But right now, you're worried about campaign tactics when you don't even have a singular vision that the companies can even talk about. So I'm worried about you up here, not down here.
That's right. That's right. Well, and so just to those two exact examples, let me tell you two very specific ways that I've seen it express itself. And I had this conversation with a VP of sales, and a CEO at a technology company, ironically enough, where two strategic values of these content-driven experiences of story. So one is exactly what you said, the internal activation and participation of people who can tell the story. Here's a specific example of that. So very commonly what will happen is we churn out content. Marketing is churning out content, and some of it's quite good. But quite frankly, they haven't really created a cohesive story with that content. It's just they're just assets that are getting thrown into the wild, and hopefully some of them do well. But maybe one does do well. And the customer calls up, gets a hold of a salesperson, and the customer says, wow, I just got this white paper from you guys, and it's really wonderful. I really like the story you're telling here. I love the value that it gave me. Tell me more about this. And the sales guy goes, yeah, I don't really know what you're talking about. I know there was a white paper, but I don't even know what it is. And instead, what if the alternative was we create a cohesive story, and just to your point, the internal activation and participation is high, and instead the customer calls up and says, I just got this really awesome white paper from you guys, and the sales guy goes, right? What about on chapter 2 when it said this, and then he says, you know what? I'm going to give you a sneak preview of the one that's coming in 2 weeks because it's even better than this one. Wait till you understand. The only way we turn salespeople into strategic storytellers, and that's really what they need to be, an optimized content channel for our business, is if we inform them of what the story is going to be and how it's going to play out, which makes the business case for strategic editorial strategy, strategic editorial planning, basically content sequencing. And that's the heart of a great brand story, is understanding how that's going to play out. That's just one example, right? Yeah. The other thing is that content marketing and or story doesn't necessarily decrease the lead generation process. And so many companies get myopically focused on this idea of, well, content marketing is going to be cheaper than direct marketing. Not necessarily true. It may be a more expensive lead. It may be a lead that takes longer to close through the process. But guess what? Maybe it's a lead that ultimately spends twice as much, or stays 5 times as long, or is more engaged and more likely to share their story. Maybe it's a better customer, not necessarily a cheaper customer. And if we only look at how many leads are coming into the funnel from every given tactic, in other words, we look at content marketing and it produces leads at this flow, and we look at advertising and it produces leads at this flow, and we measure purely on the volume of leads coming through the funnel, we may discount content marketing and storytelling because, quite frankly, it's not producing it at the same volume, when in fact it's producing a much better lead, or a much higher qualified lead, or a better spending lead. And it's such an important thing to look at this content program and storytelling from a strategic point of view, to understand all of the nuances that fit into that integrated marketing plan.
Yeah, so true. I mean, absolutely. And it gets to your point about, because it takes longer, it's sort of like employee advocacy. This is a long-term strategic view. You can't, if you're short selling, you do not want to be in this market, because this is a long-term view. And it seems to me that, when we think about measures too that are long-term view, like I think what you're alluding to includes things like lifetime value of a customer. And if the quality of your customers, to your point, is going up, your database is getting better quality leads. And it also seems to me that part of, I think, where people get so hung up when they're missing these pieces, that if we're looking at campaigns, we are missing probably the biggest bulk of what content marketing also is, which is, we may not think of it in content assets, but we should. If we've got really smart employees out there that are adding value, but they're outside the marketing sort of department, they may be adding strategic value, but we maybe aren't measuring that in the same way. So if we've got employee advocates that come from engineering, all these other places, and they're helping to increase lifetime value of a customer, the sort of subscription rates or re-up rates on our customers. Right. And if the order sizes are bigger because we've got these employee champions talking about our story, that matters. It's just, I think, part of the way traditionally content marketing has looked at sort of metrics is, I don't know that it has a clean and apples to apples way to compare those things. And it may be leaving out these other pieces that fall outside sort of the content marketing department's numbers.
It's the thing that I've been on a rant about lately, right?
Yeah.
Which is the thing between, and you just said it very elegantly, which is the difference between looking at campaign-based marketing versus content marketing from an investment perspective. This is where I go off on the rant about why campaign-based marketing isn't an investment. It's an expense. It's a valid expense. It's an expense that we can make effective. We can stack enough of them together to be really well strategically placed with the expenses that we make. In other words, it's like the gasoline I buy for my car to get me to work. I'm not going to not buy gasoline because it's more expensive one day or the next. You got to buy it. Now I can stack strategies together and I can say, well, I'm going to take a bus these days. I'm going to carpool. I'm going to buy an electric car, but it's an expense. It's not an investment. It doesn't increase in value over time. On the other hand, what you're getting to very well put is this idea of content marketing is an investment. We are investing in assets that tell our story in a more valuable way over time, to such an extreme. Like my big idea for content marketing, which the world, quite frankly, isn't ready yet for yet. But the big idea is, can we actually turn marketing into a profit center? Can we turn it into a value creation center where it doesn't sit on the expense line, so that it doesn't sit in the SG&A costs of our spreadsheet? It actually sits in the revenue cost. It actually sits in the R&D line, where we're getting such value out of the investment in this asset called a media property that we can pull value in multiple ways: product R&D, audience R&D, sales, measurement, all of those wonderful things. Now, I know that's a really hard concept to sort of even twist around and start to deploy, but there's real examples of that. Kraft Food and Family Magazine is a revenue generator for Kraft. Red Bull Media House is a revenue generator for Red Bull. Now, they don't defray all their costs in this by using that, but they're defraying a big piece of it. So at what point does it start to cross over that line where you start running a content marketing program as a profit center? And now all of a sudden, what do you do with that revenue? It's real revenue. It's a really fascinating time, but it's only when we look at it at that strategic value, not just the campaign, tactical, how many leads are we getting from this thing, and comparing them, because they're not apples to apples. They're very, very different investment models.
No question, and well said. I think it's hard for people to get their arms around the big pieces, and so many things are moving that I do think we collectively as marketers out in practicing in the industry don't always think about things in the right way, if I can say that. To your point, I think marketing is a profit center, or could be, but the way that we're thinking about it, as you said, is not right. I think of even things like earned media, where like the Lay's, come up with your own flavor thing. Well, that's a multiplier effect, and that may still be that's still a top line thing that we're not factoring into the fact that if we do our job right, that we see the marketing, it becomes an advocate-driven thing, and our audience is creating that. That just gave us a marketing budget that now is quadrupled, that we didn't have to build into that. So how are we accounting for things like that if we do it right? It's crazy. And IBM, actually, one of the things they told me, Robert, which I thought was really interesting, was they told me that their employee advocacy program, after about 7-8 years, again, long-term view here,
right?
And they didn't tell me how they measured it. So that's still, I'm going to take them at their word. I'm not sure how they measured it, but they said that it yielded a 7 times increase in the lifetime value of customers. Because what happened was, outside of the content and marketing sort of group, you had experts, subject matter experts, adding value. They were trained by marketing, and then they were set free. And they were adding so much value that it was really the subject matter experts internally who were making sure that everybody got so much value that it wasn't a question of whether or not these people would renew
Right.
and stay with
That's
IBM.
right.
So how do you then measure top line things like that? And that's where it gets really tricky.
It is. Well, because there's no neat little dashboard that says, here's the ROI on this content asset that you've invested in. You know, everybody that I know, with the aforementioned examples notwithstanding, even Kraft and Red Bull, et cetera, there's no neat Google report that says, here's how your investment in content is going along. All of those companies, including all of the companies we work with and that we see are successful with content, the measurement comes at quite an effort, actually. It's going out and doing some internal qualitative research. It's combining numbers and looking at the sources and pulling these things together, synthesizing different reports, insight, qualitative, quantitative, both together to come up with a measurement of how this is actually working against the things that you're doing. Like anything strategic that you're doing, there's no neat, if there was a neat analytics way to do this, it becomes algorithmic, and none of this is algorithmic. This is all about looking, iterating, changing. One of my favorite absolute authors, business authors and business strategists, Rita Gunter McGrath, who wrote a book called The End of Competitive Advantage. She talks about this idea of strategy today, true business strategy, is being able to move from arena to arena. Basically, competitive strategy is no longer basically a permanency. It is temporal at best. And so when you can move in and out of these arenas of competition, that's when you can, and basically what it means is how quickly can we adapt? And so there is no Google report for that. There is no templated dashboard that makes you look. What you can look at a temporal or the Google report, dashboard level is, what are the metrics? What are the thermometers of the weather, right? It's the weather. That tells you the weather. You need to then make decisions and insight based on the weather about how you're going to move through the different parts of your travel journey. And that's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no app for that, as you're alluding to. There's no app in a world of everybody.
And it's why it's strategic, and it's why we get the big bucks. They pay us for our ability to have wisdom and insight into the business strategy and be able to navigate it as such. If it were algorithmic, then anybody can do it. You don't need marketing at that point. You can just turn it over to a robot and let AI figure it out.
Right. Yeah. And thank goodness there isn't one, right? Because it's changing there's changing all the time. Well, and I think you bring up something really important, which is based on what you're saying, and I'm extrapolating here, then it seems like the vast majority of companies are really sort of off on their measurements of, I think it sounds like there's some very savvy companies out there, but I'd hazard to say, based on what, I'm hearing and probably what you're hearing, it sounds like the way that we're thinking about about quantifying the value of it to our organization, we're just not doing a very good job as marketers. And I know I'm sort of a little bit it's controversial and maybe putting some words out there, but it seems that way.
It's not controversial if you look at the history, right? So I spent my summer. So my big talk at Content Marketing World this year was on ROI and metrics and analytics. And so I spent my summer buried. It's funny, my desk is buried in old college text from marketing going back to the 40s, 30s, even the 20s of understanding the process of marketing. Guess what? We've always sucked at measurement. We just always have. We've never been good at it. From John Wanamaker, the quote that I love to use these days is, John Wanamaker back in the 20s said, half my advertising is effective, I just don't know which half. And today you could easily have John Wanamaker say, I know half my advertising is blocked, I just don't know which half. And so we with more data, with more flow of data, it hasn't made us any smarter. If you even look at the expenditures of marketing and advertising over the last 100 years, it's never gone beyond 1.5 or 2% of GDP. The advent of data and our access to it hasn't made us any smarter at it. And so I think it's less about our capacity to be smart and about our ability to use data for what it's really good for, which is giving us insight into because guess what? People do succeed. Companies actually do outperform other companies. They actually do make greater insights, but it comes down to a balance of using data in the right way and a wisdom to be able to synthesize that data into meaningful insight and action. And those are the two things. And most marketing organizations, I find, focused so much on the left-hand side of that, really just, can we pour more data on the solution to try and make it more algorithmic or templated? And it just doesn't work because it always flattens out. It always flattens out.
No, it's so true. I echo that. And I think, big data is important, but in this sort of world of big data where the promise was we'll have insights into everything and the world will be better. I don't see that. Not to say that there isn't a point where, to your point, and well said, is that it's about insights and it's about being able to make better decisions. It's not about having perfect data. There is no such thing. We know that. But I think we're in a world where there's so much of it now that I'm not sure we're mining the right things or that we're tracking the right things. And to that point, what do you think? I don't know if we can reduce it, and this might be oversimplistic. This might be oversimplistic because it's boiling the ocean. What are those things that you say, if I could just give advice to companies out there to just do a couple things differently to make a difference, what are those things? Because I think everybody's grappling with how to make it better.
Sure. So I guess there's two things that I would look at. One is, the first is to stop looking at content marketing as an alternative to campaign-based marketing. Yeah. And so that's the what I typically see is sort of the business case is, oh, we should stop doing campaign-based or interruptive-based advertising and campaign-based marketing and replace it with content marketing. No, that's not the point. The point is to add content marketing into an integrated marketing strategy. I love advertising. I love PR. I love SEO. I love direct marketing. I love Google Ads. I love social media. But use them for what they're effective for, which is a paid media campaign-based approach that is made better, more effective, less expensive, better customers, more valuable customers with a content and storytelling driven strategy over the top of it. So that's the first thing, is that it doesn't have to replace, it needs to be additive and making all of those things better. And secondly, which feeds into that, is how can you start looking at that storytelling from a different investment model, right? From a different investment model that says we're not trying to replace direct marketing, but nor should we look at it in the same way that we look at direct marketing. In other words, the metaphor for this is when we first got television shows, they basically turned the cameras around and filmed radio people doing radio shows. And that was television for a good number of years. It wasn't until they started to really explore the medium that they could say television should be something different. That's what we've done with content marketing, is we've basically turned around the cameras and said, how does content marketing relate to direct marketing and data-driven marketing? And look at and we've sort of assigned all of these things, leads, more leads, SEO, as sort of the only metrics that we look at with content marketing. Just creating story and these content-driven experiences can drive multiple lines of value. Some of them take years to attain. Yes. Some of them will be done in months. Some of them will be done in quarters. But laying out a strategic plan for why we're creating content and these content-driven experiences can begin to look more like a product development plan that draws investment over time, a different investment model that ultimately provides greater value that increases over time. Those two things at a strategy level are really the two most important things to understand about why story is such an important component of business strategy these days.
And you said it really well there, which is the idea of really thinking about marketing as a product. It's why are we not productizing and thinking of it as a roadmap and a product plan? It just, as you were talking there, it hit me. It's like, we don't think about it that way. And that's a problem. That is a problem, because in essence, that's really what it is. And if we were any other department in a company like engineering, there is a roadmap. There is a roadmap for what we're going to build and when and how we're going to measure it. And I think, it's a tricky burden that marketers have, because they have always been looked at as an expense center, not a profit center. However, if we can think about it as a product and start planning in the way you're describing, it seems to me that would be a big step in that right direction. Here's
the corollary that I find so intriguing these days. So it's well worn territory to talk about how content-driven experiences are affecting product development, right? So looking at everything from the way Starwood now integrates digital content and digital apps into their, you can check into your room with your iWatch, you can check out your status of your room. They're changing the way that they deliver product through content-driven experiences. John Deere doing it with their app development. They have 20 to 30 different apps in the App Store now that when you buy your tractor, now it's a part of the experience is these apps that deliver content experiences to you to create a better customer experience about why you would buy a tractor from them. Uber, Airbnb, all these disruptive companies. Basically, nobody's quibbling with the idea of developing, you've heard Eric Schmidt say this, you've heard somebody at IBM say this, which is basically we're all turning into software development companies and content-driven companies at the product level, adding these content-driven experiences. Why wouldn't we think that the same opportunity and the same risk involves marketing as well, right? Creating content-driven experiences that enhance the marketing experience, the buyer's journey at the top of the funnel. I just think it seems to me to be such a no-brainer that the same opportunity as well as the same risk exist at the top of the funnel as it does once they've consumed the product.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, it makes so much sense. And when we think about experiences and customer experiences, again, we're talking about these little short blips because things do flatten out with these campaigns and these short-term things. Right. And we're thinking about content. We're thinking about a longer trajectory. And so we're thinking about, there's a maturity model too. It seems to me that happens with content. And I don't hear a lot of companies talking about it because it gets complicated very quickly. And I get it. One more variable that everybody has to think about, and it gets very ugly. However, it also seems to me that that's where the thinking about it as a product and content as a product can help a lot, because there is that novelty factor. There is that short trajectory. You and I both know that topics peak and then they flatline and something else takes its place. Right. But over the longer haul, there is a longer maturity kind of shelf life to that strategic story. And so it seems to me maybe marketers also need to think about what is that maturity model on any given sort of set of content things that we're doing. Right.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point, which is, one of the things that you're starting to see. So Joe at Content Marketing World this year talked about basically, and, with no hubris at all, he stole this idea from me in a post that I wrote a while back, which he talked about how we're really in the sort of trough of disillusionment if you look at the Gartner hype cycle of where content marketing is right now and customer experiences are. What you're starting to see now are the death of content marketing. People suck at it. People can't do it very well. It's really difficult. There's no ROI. We should give up, stop. This is the trough of disillusionment, which is the early adopters proved the case, but they're really the only ones who are getting value out of it. Therefore, businesses can't build audiences, therefore there's no use in doing it. It's crazy making for me, because as a marketer, I go, everybody sucks at it and they're failing at it. And if I can get good at it, I differentiate myself in the marketplace. So why wouldn't I try to get good at it? I mean, I might fail. They might be right. But to say that we shouldn't try because everybody else has tried and failed is such a flawed statement. Let's try. Let's see if we can actually be the ones to be good at it, differentiate on it, and actually we'll push everybody else to the side. I just think it's absolutely imperative to try.
No question. I mean, it was true with blogging. When blogging first hit, I mean, everybody was bad at it. A few people were really good at it.
Exactly.
And if I read one more post declaring the death of blogging, I'm going to laugh. I'm just going to, my head's going to explode, because that's not true. It means that most of us, you're right, suck at it, but there's a huge opportunity to get better. And if you're better, you stand out. And it's also about maturing as an industry, and as practitioners, we figure out what works and what doesn't. So it's a turd. Everybody admits that content marketing is a little bit in that state of turdery right now. Right. Yeah. But is
that the technical term for it? Is that the technical term for it? Yeah.
It is a technical term. I can break it down for you. But we have to do it because we have to get better. And so I'm totally in agreement with you. And somebody once reminded me too, it's like, it's sort of like customer experience design. Most customer experiences are horrible out there. Right. But here's the good news. And it's kind of a good news, bad news, sad situation. is that all we have to do is be marginally better, and like all of a sudden the bar goes up, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, I mean, you can't get worse with content marketing. And I think there's an opportunity, a huge opportunity, if anything, for people, as you're talking about, to cut through the noise and really lead the way and show how it's done.
It's such a great point. It's such a great point. If you just, if it's like, if the only, even if the only benefit you get out of creating a solid story strategy and a solid content strategy for your business is that your content that you use for collateral and direct marketing purposes is a little better, shouldn't that be business case enough, right? So even if you are only going to be marginally better at it, doesn't it make sense? I had this conversation with the CEO of a company the other day. I said, look, nobody quibbles with accounting as a process. Nobody quibbles with legal as a process. Nobody quibbles with product development as a process. Nobody quibbles with marketing or sales as a process. But why do we look at content and storytelling, the thing that we create more than anything else, even the product and service we put into the marketplace, we create more content than anything else in the business. Why is that just an attribute of everybody's job and not a strategic process? It baffles me. Why content, the communication that is what we are as a company, isn't a strategic process in the business. And the CEO will go, oh, right. I get it. Right.
Now, it's such an important point you're making, because it is everybody's job, but someone's got to measure it. There has to be a department of quality. There has to be a quality assurance department, and there has to be somebody at the end of the day who owns the responsibility for measuring it. And so I love the idea that content is everybody's responsibility, but where it starts to, I think, get a little bit funny and maybe laughable, and I'm sort of taking it to the comic extreme, is if it's everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility.
That's right.
Then who's really measuring it? And there has to be accountability. And you're right. Because we see what happens when there's bad accounting, and somebody takes the fall for that. You know, sometimes executives go to jail when there's bad accounting.
That's right.
And shouldn't we in marketing really, it's time to have that mature sensibility of, all right, it is a process. What's the process going to be? And how are we going to measure it with maturity and with leading indicators and lagging indicators, so we're really smart?
Exactly.
Because what bugs me is when I talk to people that are so hung up on the lagging indicators, and by then it's just too late. And if you're hung up at the little tactical things that are going to go wrong, but there's no overarching story that was bad from the beginning, that you actually could see that was bad from the beginning, you missed some signs, and you didn't have the right leading indicators in your dashboard, in your app for that.
Exactly. Yeah, having a strategic process could not be more of an imperative for content and storytelling in the business. You know, it's like, if you look at, you know, even just something as simple as IT and the technology that we use in a business, right? Yeah. So, you know, of course, you know, more and more we're allowed to bring our own phones, and we're bring our own devices. And there's a whole thing about this in the CIO world, which the idea of bring your own device and all that kind of stuff. But strategy around the process of technology rollout, the way that laptops are handed out, the software you're allowed to put on them, the process of technology rollout is managed as a strategic process. Content should be the same thing. Of course, it's everybody's job, just like it's everybody's job to manage their laptop and use their laptop for productivity purposes. We create of course, everybody's going to create content for various purposes, but if it's not treated as a strategic process, one where the communication of the company through all the different channels that are managed are measured and managed as such, then it just becomes everybody's job and nobody's job, and you get buried in it. You know, I've talked to so many businesses where they go, well, I would love to focus on quality of what we're saying and the quality of the message and the story and a structure, but quite frankly, I just have to get it up. I just have to, my calendar, my strategic calendar is simply a backlog of every product marketing person who wants to get their stuff out on the website or the social channels. If you look at their calendar, it's just a long to-do list. That's not a strategic calendar. That's just stuff you have to do on a day-to-day basis. And so creating that strategic process could not be more imperative.
Where do you advise people to start? Because it can be overwhelming, to your point. I think that's where it gets hard to get your arms around it. So where do you tell people to make a dent?
There's two things really where, so bringing this back down a little bit into something more manageable, into the marketing world, the world of marketing and what we're talking about here. I advise two things. One is, if we're trying to build a business case for this, in other words, we're trying to do something new and innovative in the business, what I'll suggest is looking at the entirety of the customer's journey is overwhelming. That the amount of stuff that you could do would be just too much. Where does it hurt the most, right? So look at where it hurts the most currently. Are we having a problem with awareness? Are we having a problem with nurturing, that sales guys can't get the content out the door fast enough when we need to empower them? Are we closing customers, but quite frankly, we're churning them out just as fast, so we need a loyalty experience? We need a cross-sell or upsell experience. We need a evangelistic experience where people can share customer stories and our wonderful value as a story. Where does it hurt the most? Because quite frankly, that's where we have the least amount to lose. And so we can do something innovative and add a process. So and this is the second piece of it, build a business case for the function of content, for how content will be strategically used at that part of the customer's journey to deliver a better customer experience. Now, that may express itself as a blog or a magazine or a community or a website or innumerable things, a newsletter program, a social, whatever it is. That customer experience is truly where you want to focus first, and get everybody focused on creating a strategic process that feeds that experience in a storytelling way, that tells a story over time, that is a long-term investment. And quite frankly, if we can structure it like that, now all of a sudden, if we're successful there, even a little bit, now we've moved the needle of the business, because we've made that part of the buyer's journey a little more effective. Now, don't give that money back to the organization. Take it and optimize the next one and the next one and the next one. Create these strategic experiences across the buyer's journey as a process iteratively over time. So start where it hurts the most is my usual advice.
That's such great advice too, because you really don't have much to lose. And I think when it comes to experimentation with content, that's where people get really afraid, because it can be elusive in measuring it in the traditional way we measure other pieces of content.
It's a new muscle. It's a new muscle for many organizations.
But I think to what you're saying is, once you have a process, you can afford to be a little bit more experimental. And I think about Coke. I mean, Coke says they spend about 10% of their ideas on experimental ideas, but they can, because Coke has a process.
That's right.
And Coke is very disciplined about how they measure and how they execute. And so I think when you can kind of heal the pain, to your point, and actually start making dents in the process, I think it allows you a little more flexibility in also trying these things, and maybe knowing that, okay, we're going to try something experimental, and it might sort of be outside the normal way we measure things.
That's right. That's right. I just saw an article that talked about Stephen Quinn, who's the CMO of Walmart, spoke to this really well, where he says their process, their model for this is what he calls, it's ironically just like Coca-Cola, their 70-20-10 split. His is a 70-20-10 split. But what he says is 70% of their time is spent on today, 20% of their time is spent on tomorrow, and 10% of their time is spent on the future. And so they dedicate 10% of their time and process and efforts to focusing on long-term goals, long-term future plans, long-term efforts that may not pay dividends for years. And then 20% focusing on next week, next month, next quarter, and 70% focusing on today. The challenge is that most marketing organizations I talk to spend 100% of their time on yesterday, right? They're already late. They're going into work today, and they're already late for stuff that was supposed to be done yesterday. And that's the pattern we have to stop. We have to start getting strategic about how we spend our time focusing on what we're looking at down the road.
Absolutely. Amen. I feel like we just went to church. We went to church there, and the church of Robert Rose. Can I get an amen?
Oh, dear. No, oh, dear. The parishioners should be very scared. Yeah. Pass the hat.
Well, no, it's such an important point, because I agree. I've always in my mind thought of it, the way we started out this conversation, 40 minutes ago. It's like there's lagging and leading. And I still feel, again, that people are so hunkered down on doubling down on the campaign level, which to me feels like such minutia. And it's like that is not where all of our efforts have to be. And we need to have some bigger level kind of, I hate to say dashboard thinking because then I'd have to kick my own butt for jargon, but I think we do need to have a higher level of awareness about what are those, because every organization may be different. There may be bellwether leading indicators that are different for your organization, that are different for your competition or for somebody else. And you really have to be attuned to what those leading indicators are.
Yep.
And, you know,
yeah, it's something that I talk to many marketing, you know, we've worked with, I don't know, 80 to 100 different larger marketing organizations over the last 18 months. And the pattern that I keep seeing here is that as marketing becomes or has become siloed even from itself, where now you have social teams and social CRM teams and email teams and e-marketing teams and web content teams and brand teams, and PR teams and sales enablement teams, and all these teams that are measuring themselves at ever sort of thinning strata of the funnel. What we end up with is this thing I call marketing at the cubicle level, right? Where every one of us is doing a strategic thing for one very small sliver of the funnel or for one very small sliver of the buyer's journey, but we're only managing and measuring in that and we have the data. I can tell you that I'm getting more likes. I can tell you that my social media following is growing. I can tell you that I'm getting more web traffic. I can tell you that I'm getting more conversions on my email newsletter list, and on and on and on. But what does that mean? What does it mean for the business? We're so siloed even from ourselves that whole process doesn't equate to much. One quick story. I love this story so much. This one company that I worked with, big B2B manufacturing company, they grew 650% year over year. And so they went, holy smoke, we need to understand why. And so they actually did this huge project where they went out and did an anatomy lesson on every single campaign, every minutia campaign that they had done over the last 18 months. And so they looked at it to see in its totality, which one was the success, which one was the tip maker, right? You know, which one was the one. What they found, every single individual campaign was either flat or resulted in a negative return.
Wow.
But somehow they grew at 650%. And so you go, what happened?
Yeah.
So you start getting into, conversations of, okay, well, attribution and multi-attribution and sales guys taking credit for something that marketing, but it doesn't matter. The point is that if you manage it at a strategic level, if you look at marketing in the leading and lagging indicators and multiple lines of value at a strategic level, now the individual number of website visits, the number of blogs, subscribe, all that stuff is just, that's a secondary indicator to help us improve our processes toward reaching a more strategic goal. And it's a hard thing to do. It's an easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do, but it's so important that we get out of this and start solving big marketing problems, not the little ones.
Yeah, no question. I had a client that we actually, about a year ago, we did a very nerdy, want to get my nerd on here. We did a very, kind of, we found the line of best fit. We did a regression analysis, which is as nerdy as I'm going to get. Yeah. And we actually did. We looked at all these different things and we found a really, really strong correlation with engagement and things like shares. In Twitter as a precursor. That was a leading indicator of revenue. And so when engagement went down, it was like, all right, you got to be careful because it seems to be correlated.
Fascinating.
And engagement was a precursor and a very strong, highly correlated variable with revenue. And it just was. And because they also had a conference model, a technology conference business, when engagement would go up, registration, it was a fascinating thing. And so sometimes we do get mired at the really small level, which is okay if we know that that's a leading indicator and we know that's a bellwether.
Point. Yeah, such a great point.
And it's knowing what drives your business. And I wouldn't have thought, but it really rationalized and justified putting more resources into understanding the engagement and where it was coming from. And once we were able to do that, we could understand those peaks and valleys.
It's a great point.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, do you feel with social media, are we still sniffing glue?
I like that. That's the tweetable moment. That's the tweetable moment right there. Are we sniffing glue? I'd say it's like that. It's a great scene from Airplane. I picked the wrong time of the week to stop sniffing glue. I picked the wrong time of the week to stop social media. Yeah, I think look, I think social media strategy is evolving.
Yeah.
I think it's becoming much more of a paid media option, and a very successful and effective one, I might add, right? So I'm seeing tremendous success with Facebook paid advertising, tremendous success with paid placement, tremendous success with LinkedIn paid placement and targeting. But it's, as I've said, maybe too cutely, but I've said before, I believe Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn are the ABC, NBC, and CBS of our time. They are broadcast media. They should be treated as such. We have a huge audience there. We can pay for their eyeballs, and we can get in front of them in a paid way and make it very effective for our business strategy. But trying to build a community there, as we've said, it's like, ad nauseum now on our podcast, don't build your house on rented land. It's not the place to try and build a community, because guess what? They're going to change the rules on you.
Yeah, that's so true. You just make the great point for, owned media and earned media, because you just don't know what you're going to get. And it is shifting, and I think I've heard you and actually Joe say this before, which is think about yourself as a media company. And if it is media, what are the rules, and how do you manage the media assets, and how are you measuring those?
Sure. So it's the audience, right? It's the audience that's important here.
Yeah.
The content that we create is purely a bridge to reach the audience. Right. And so if we're a business, B2C, B2B, governmental organization, nonprofit, doesn't matter. Engagement with an audience that we can address at our will is the goal. That's the brass ring that we're trying to reach for here, right? Yeah. That database, that addressable audience that we get to determine, and by the way, have opted in to want to receive communication from us. If we can, that is what we're trying to build. The content we create, quite frankly, is just a bridge to get there. Right. And so audience development and addressable audience development becomes the core goal here. And if you look at every successful, from the startup side, which is what Joe speaks to so often with his idea of Content Inc., from the startup side, when you look at what they do, they build the audience first and then figure out how to monetize it. Right. If you look at it from successful enterprises these days, what they're doing is they're figuring out what the audience wants and then making that. One of the things that I love so much about the Lego story, which of course everybody knows the Lego story is so great. Yeah. But the thing about Lego that's so awesome is that they didn't go to Hollywood and say, hey, spill out a box of toys and say, make some movie, make whatever movie you can out of these toys, because this is what we got from a product perspective. They said, make the movie you want to make a great movie, and we'll make the toys to match. Whatever comes successful out of the movie, we'll make the toys. They've discovered, and I think this is so true, this is Red Bull, this is great brands are discovering that if you build an engaged audience, they'll tell you what they want to buy. Yeah. And you can then make that thing and it ever increase, because technology doesn't work just at the marketing level. Technology, whether it's 3D printing or Internet of Things or our ability to produce things much more cheaply all across the global marketplace, everything we do has become easier. And so if we can build an audience, which is really difficult, can we figure out how to make stuff that they want? I think we can.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And I think well said, because if you're building that audience, to your point, they're going to tell you what they want. At least they're going to help you. They're going to help you generate ideas. And I think you said it earlier in our discussion today that we also need to look at things like R&D, because now if we have an engaged audience, they are our outsourced R&D arm, because they're the ones that they're basically essentially reducing our product risk to zero, almost zero, because if we're listening to them the way that we should, we will have sort of vetted these product ideas because they come from them.
That's right.
And we can think about the value of R&D and all these other idea generation, all these things that are coming from our audience that I think marketing sometimes we don't, if we could value that and count that, it's to your point about looking at marketing as a profit center. So
absolutely. Look at so the maybe one of my favorite examples of this is Johnson & Johnson with BabyCenter.com. So not many people know that BabyCenter.com is owned by J&J. And that's 4 million moms in their audience who love and appreciate the content that comes from BabyCenter.com. Mm-hmm. And J&J, by the way, it's a separate division of J&J. They charge advertising. Now, they don't sell advertising to other pharmaceutical companies, but they sell advertising to Unilever and P&G and a number of product brands that also sell products to moms. Yeah. And they make money out of it. So it's a profit center as a division. It makes money. But the data that they get out of that audience is so immeasurably valuable to them, because they know how to resonate with moms. They know, for example, that moms plan their baby's first birthday at 10 months. That informs so much about what they might do from a marketing campaign of product to advertising, to the way that they address them in emails, to the way that they look at product research and development. They know, for example, of what messages resonate. They know, for example, when they sell Tylenol, whether they should say sleeps through the night, sleep overnight, or sleep tonight. They can basically tell you what the main message should be by looking at the data and what the audience tells them is important. Such an invaluable asset, that audience they have of 4 million moms that can be, and that's the key, multiple lines of value, strategic value as a property, as an audience, and as a media asset provides J&J that strategic value. It's not the only marketing they do, but it's a valuable component of the marketing they do.
It's huge. I think if I may get this wrong, but as I remember right, I'll have to double check this. I believe I read that Procter & Gamble, approximately 20% of their revenues every year come from new products that originated with their audience. Their audience came up with the idea, said, hey,
interesting.
Please make this for us. That is a very powerful statement for then. Look, it's huge. It's huge when you think about an organization like Procter & Gamble or, you know, any of these big organizations. That's huge. That's the power of audience engagement.
And it's only going to increasingly become that way, right? As personalization and hyper-personalization, 3D printing, as technology even improves even further, the expectations of customers, our expectations from the brands we do business with is not going to only be give me a personalized experience. It's going to be give me a personalized product. And so, so what's at the core of that? You know, it's like, not to get too nerdy and geeky down into the product development world, but what's going to be the core, the differentiator there when everybody can produce a Nike shoe or everybody can produce and 3D print a pair of sunglasses? The core development there is going to be what experience and what story are we telling? The differentiator, Seth Godin has said content marketing is the only marketing that's left. I'll just tell this. I say our story, our point of view, our ability to create that story in a consumer's mind is the only differentiator we have left.
Amen. I think that's a tweetable moment because I agree with you. I think that's it. At the end, at the end of the day, your story is really the only truth that your audience is going to remember, and that's the thing that's going to differentiate you. And I can't think of a better cap to that than that. I feel like in an hour of talking to you, Robert, it's always like it's like I don't know if it's a church metaphor or if it's like I got like some kind of certificate. Like, you know, I'm like. Because I feel smart, I go, okay, I've learned some things. This is good.
Right.
This is and have fun too. So
it's always a blast to talk with you, Kathy. It's always a blast.
Same here. Talking to you and getting your perspective as somebody steeped in this world of measurement, and you're fighting the good fight. And I got to tell you, as a marketer and a storyteller, I applaud the work you're doing because it is a really important thing today, and this measurement issue is not going away. It is an incredibly important thing.
It's really fun. I'm having the most fun I've ever had in my career ever. So it's it's what gets me out of bed in the morning. So it's great.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad that smart people like yourself are working on that because it is important, and I think we all benefit. So, Robert, thank you so much for being on StoryDNA.
Oh, thank you for having me again. It was such an honor to be here.
Oh, pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.